Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this next episode of the Online Bible Institute Network's podcast. The whole crew's here. We're excited to be with you today. We're in the Kingdom Alignment series, and as we look through these notes, Dad, you've preached this sermon before. It's always a very impactful message, but you're working it into the Kingdom Alignment series, kind of as we segue into the giving part of this chapter that we're in. And you read in Matthew 6:24, and I think this is one of the few times you'll actually use the New King James Version where you reference it, and it kind of changes the last word in verse 24 of chapter 6. And Pastor Brain, I'll just read this one for now. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. And you've called this message the mammon trap. And I think it's appropriate even now to kind of talk about this, and it helps rephrase that verse, because I think in the NIV it's you cannot serve both God and money. And you're in this message, you kind of go through the powers and principalities behind it, not just money itself. So, with that, Dad, go ahead and take it away, and then we'll pick Pastor Brain's brain here afterwards.
Jesus has been laying this out, and each week he's sort of taking us deeper into the alignment of the heart. And, the last few weeks were sort of, like, what do you desire? What do you treasure? How do you see the world? And then it gets to this idea of, well, who do you serve? Who's your master? And and Brain can probably give us some insight, from a different country perspective, but from our culture, unfortunately, money becomes sort of the major issue. It can be all the time, and it's probably mastering people without them really realizing it. And I like that the New King James uses the word mammon. I think it's a better idea because mammon means more than money. It encompasses more than just money, and so it's really talking about what money sort of represents, because what the competition is here is worship. And we've been talking about that in every message. I've said, what your heart, what you decide you value the most, what you treasure the most, that becomes what you worship. And even if you don't think that's true, it is very, very true. And in our culture, and I'm sure it's true in most of the world, that becomes something that competes for your worship, because we begin to think that, money and mammon is what's responsible for things that only God can be responsible for, which is security and freedom and peace and power and position and pleasure. And that we sometimes think that, well, that's what money does, but God does all those things. And if we're not careful, we'll get money in that spot. Mammon will get that spot. And it's definitely a power principality thing. And it competes for worship. And so even as we then, in this message, I'm going to talk about money some, it's really a message about worship. And the problem is that a lot of this stuff has been taught. I want to be careful how I say it. I don't agree with the way it's often taught. And so then you have conflicts with people going in. And a lot of people think that the church, particularly in our country, that one of the main things the church is after is your people's money. And that just becomes how they view the church. And so we've actually gone to great lengths to not let that be what people think of us. We give stuff away constantly. We don't even really take up an offering. We like people to give, but it's not like you have to do this thing. Trying to break down some of this, because if you can't talk to people about it, mammon wins and gets stuck in that spot, and you sort of can't help get it out of there by causing people to realize that how we handle our money really reveals our heart, but not to God. It reveals it to you. God knows your heart. It's not the issue. I mean, God already knows your heart. It's who he is. And so, but how you end up handling money reveals your heart to you. And there are some things that make it very clear in the way that we live that it's got first place. And you never really experience the full and abundant life if mammon is sitting in the first place of your life. You just can't. And so it has to be challenged, and yet you have to be careful, or people won't hear what you're saying. They just immediately go back to, you're just after my money. And it's got nothing to do with that. It's really ultimately not about money. It's about worship and the freedom that comes from having our hearts aligned with God. So, and so I'm going to take some time and dig into some things this week to help in a practical way, because I really feel that's what we offer, which is why I have done this message a few times, because I don't talk about money all that often, and yet money is a pretty big deal, as you can see, it's right here, and it's again moving around this thing that people just, if you here where we're at, it feels like if I talk about it, they think that's all I care about. So I have plenty of material, but it does need to be talked about for that reason, that we have to challenge people that have mammon stuck in that spot without realizing. They wouldn't tell you that that's what they worship. They don't think that's what they worship, but you can tell pretty quickly by how they're living what's got first place, and who and what they think is actually provides security and all that good stuff. And if you haven't really thought through it, you'll let mammon run into that spot, and that's just not healthy for anybody. And so we have to talk about the fact that because Jesus, you can't serve both, but also money isn't evil. And sometimes people will think that money is evil, and they'll quote it wrong. That money is the root of all evil. You hear that all the time, and it's like, well, it's not what the Bible says. It doesn't say that money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money, the worship of money. It's exactly what he's talking about. That's what causes the problems. And if you've got things out of line, and you've got mammon where God should be, that evil, you're not aligned with how you need to live, and it just causes all sorts of issues. And it says some people eager for money, mammon, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. It can get in such the way that we aren't able to worship the way that we can handle life. And so we get back to this idea about how we handle money actually reveals our heart. But again, I'll say it again, but not to God. It's all about revealing it to you. And God knows your heart. So he's aware if he's number one or if mammon's number one. God's fully aware of that. And so we have to be willing to challenge it and look at it. And so I go into this thing, again, it may not be very practical for your context, but for an American context, we have this whole debt issue that hangs on a lot of people, and exacerbated here by credit cards, among other things. And one of the things that I say to people is I start talking about this, and I'll say that here's what mammon has done, what the enemy has done in a very crafty way, is he's got people in our culture, instead of living within the 100% that we actually have, whatever you have coming in, that's what you got. It's 100%. But when we start adding debt to it, credit to it, we start living at 120%, let's say. When you can't, it's not, you can only live at 100% unless you do something.
There's people who would disagree with that statement too.
I know, but what
the
happens?
Whole country operates that way. But anyway,
the moment that you get stuck there, you can't enjoy life the way you really should. You're enjoying mammon instead of God. I think that's what happens. And mammon will let you down, pierce your heart with many griefs, because it's not God. Mammon isn't God. So when I talk to people, I work through this message, and I start at the end. I start at the okay. Well, here's the issue. It's 120%. We got to get this 20% out of here. This debt that most people carry, and the way that you start to work out of that is by getting on a budget. A spending plan is the term, that because people freak out when you say budget. Okay, we'll give you a spending plan then, but you have to sort of have a plan for how you're going to spend your money. Uh, uh, John Maxwell said something that changed my life years ago. A budget tells your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. And that was life changing for me, because I used to, where'd my money go? And you, until you get on a budget, you have no idea, because you're spending money you're not even aware of on a daily basis. And so oftentimes people are shocked when they start realizing how much money they're spending on things because they just kind of spend them. And so if you get on a budget, that starts to track some of that. And then on a budget, you attack your debt. You need to get back into the 100%. So I always tell people to start there, where oftentimes when I hear people talk about this, in the church, well, you got to get your giving right. And I think that's true, but I don't think I can encourage somebody to give if they're living at 100%. They look at me like, where's that money coming from? Now you're asking me to be at 130%. You're making it worse, not better. And so I go, okay, so let's just get your desire is to ultimately be a giver, get rid of your debt, and then get yourself into a budget that works on the actual 100% that you make. And out of that, you have to attack that debt until it's gone. And then what happens is that you should, now that you've living in the 100, you need to start backing that down, because nobody should live at all 100. You should be saving 10%. Right. And people used to save, but a lot of people stopped saving when they got credit cards because they didn't see the need. If I have an issue, I'll just use my credit card. Well, if you're trying to get out of debt and you don't have any savings, every time an issue comes up, you're back in debt again. And issues come up, especially when you're trying to get out of debt. They just pop up because mammon don't want you to go. So you have to make these hard choices, and you pay down your debt, and then you start getting used to saving 10%, saving for the future, a rainy day, saving for purchases. I'll have that discussion that just people have gotten so used to just swiping a card here for what they want that they have no idea what the real value is. And if you actually will save for it instead of just buying it on a whim, oftentimes if you have to save and spend money that you saved on something, you don't buy it, because it was so hard to save it that you're like, well, I don't, or you don't even care about it anymore. So you have to talk about saving. And then I think only then, really, when you've got people sort of, okay, you're out of debt and you're saving money. Now, that first thing that you're supposed to do your money is give. And the giving is the most fun you can have with your money. But most people never get there, so they can experience it. It's absolutely the most thing. And because it reflects God's character, because God's a giver, he wants us to be givers. And so we need to live in a way that giving is a possibility, and not something that we, begrudge or can't do, happily, because we're stuck. And so this is all a trap that has impacted our culture in a big way, and it's grown in a sneaky way. Because when credit cards first started in this country, Diners Club was the first card. They used it in restaurants. You could go to a restaurant; it was easier than having cash, I guess. And but you paid it off every month. You didn't carry a balance, and that was true with American Express, which were kind of the next big one. For everybody just paid them off every month. You didn't. It wasn't no such thing as carrying a balance. And then they realized how much money they could make by letting people carry a balance, because once you get, the reason it took off was that they realized how much money they can amass in charging ridiculous percentages for balances that are carried, and that people will always then be paying never on the balance, but just on the interest, and they're stuck forever. And credit cards now in our country, it's not unusual for them to be 30% interest, which is, I can't even believe it's legal. Higher than that sometimes. I think the average I looked at 22%, which is, you get yourself in credit card debt, and unless you aggressively go after it, you'll never get out. To pay it off at minimum payments, assuming that you never charge anything else, takes 20 or 30 years. And
they'll tell you that
until
on the credit card statements too. And but you got to look at them.
Oh, they're horrible.
Yeah.
Depending on the economy, sometimes they'll get you in for a real low percentage, but then it sneaks up, and you don't want to do those things. You need to be wise with that. And sometimes some people are good with credit cards and always pay them off. That's a different thing. But if you're not there, you don't want to be. You can't. It sounds good in theory, but if you're not out of debt, you can't even put yourself in that situation, because you'll just always be in debt. You can't get free. So really, what it all gets down to, as I said, it's really not about money. It's about worship. And it's about what you trust, who you trust. It's about really who sits on the throne of your heart. Is it God, or is it mammon? And you examine that by going, well, where do you look first for security and for peace and for significance and for hope? Because whatever's sitting in that place, that's your master. And Jesus said you can't serve both. And so money, money is not evil. In fact, it's neutral, and it's kind of necessary. It's just a terrible master. And it's mastered lots of people. And so yeah, it's always a challenge, I think, when we talk about this. For me, this is a comfortable way of approaching it. And because you can get back and forth in the scripture about, are we supposed to tithe, and what does that look like? And there's it's people. This is one of those few spots I always kind of get a chuckle, because all of a sudden a lot of people want the law to be happening. You know what I mean? Oh, and like everything else, no free, but law. And it's a heart condition. So all this stuff is a heart condition. It's an inside out thing. You should be living at a spot where giving, and 10% it's a pretty good. I mean, it's in the scripture enough that it's a worthwhile sort of thing. But that's what you should at least be heading towards, and hopefully you can do better.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've done and you should give to, what you should be given to. So anyway, Jesus is he's just lovingly inviting people back into the right spot, and and he does that with us all the time, so that, because he wants us to experience life. We're gonna, in the next week, I think Doug's up next week, not this weekend, but the following weekend, that we're going to tie these three sort of things that we've talked about that may seem disconnected back into, so you can see how it all fits together. And it's really important that the treasure in your heart, and the eyes, and the lamp of the body, and the God and mammon. This is three sort of thought theme that really works together, and really helps us get our hearts aligned, and then we can go from there. But that's kind of what's up this week, and I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, I have preached this in some way, shape, or form in the past a few times, and it's usually pretty requested. I have people ask me all the time, where is that message? I need to show it to my adult children, or somebody who needs to get this thing figured out. And so anyway, that's what's coming up. Did you lose your electricity over there, Frank?
One of my lights just went out. So I guess I'll figure out why after the session.
But those technical issues, I was having them as we were trying to get started. My computer's been acting a little slow all day.
Oh.
And it's funny, because I'm sure it's very fast, but it's not like it normally is. And I can feel myself like, what are you doing? Why are you not acting normal?
Slow is like my regular experience. So
yeah,
you're slow.
I know. I try not to complain. I get it. Well, you wanna add anything to that, Brink?
Yeah, it's great. I loved this teaching the last time you did it. And I tried to stream it for a few persons in our church to watch. And I'm going to do the same this time around and get it to them. I'm thinking of doing it differently this time, just getting the link and sharing it on WhatsApp for whoever cares to listen to it, because it's rich, it's really interesting. And whenever you talk about it, I feel like it's an indictment on myself, because yeah, it's so easy, and it's really interesting how easy it is to be, to suddenly get mastered by money. We were in Bible studies yesterday, and I was just mentioning how, before now, we used to care about relationships. We used to care about people. We used to care a lot about, visitation, going to visit someone in the hospital. I mean, just because we feel like we're brothers, we're friends, and all of that. But suddenly, we're at a point where, um, when someone calls me and says they're in the hospital, for example, and the first question I ask is, what do you need? You know, um, I'm really busy trying to make some money, and so the best thing for me to do is send them some money, and just let them know you'll be fine. That's that concern, that care of, you know, going to visit them in the hospital, to pray with them, to hold their hand and to encourage them. It's no longer there, because we're all busy chasing money, and we have suddenly started to feel like money can solve everything. It can really handle all of our problems and make our relationships better and all of that. And you have families now that operate like that as well. Um, the father wakes up early in the morning, he's off to work, and then the children have to get up and not see their dad. And dad comes back 10 p.m. In the night, when kids are already asleep and all of that. So the world is fast closing in on us, and I feel that there's no difference in context anymore as far as money is concerned. Everyone is really busy chasing money, and we have forgotten the tiny things that make society what it's supposed to be, that make life what it's supposed to be. There are three of these concepts that I think about whenever you share this. The first is this that I just mentioned, that money will solve all of our problems, and whatever problem someone has, you just need to send them some money. They're in a hospital, just send them some money. They're stuck somewhere, just send them some money, and it's going to get things solved. And we're growing distant, from one another. The the other two are very much related to the church. And like you said, in your context, it's the same for us. The church, many people feel that the church really is all about money. And that's an increasing problem in our context now. We have members in the church who actually refuse to give, because, somehow it it amazes me every time we watch the services. When I do that with my wife, and we get to the close of the service, I would always make this comment, so these people really don't ask for offerings. I'm like, yeah, they hardly do that. You just, I think what you say at the end of the service is, ways to give are on the screen, and that's it. For us, we would have to begin talking about giving, from the middle of the service. Like, we we need you to give for this. We have this project. We have this person to help. We have this, because somehow, I don't know if I should say, unfortunately, we almost always don't have the money. So we have to talk about it all the time and get people to give and give and give. And so many people now feel, even some in our churches, they're beginning to feel like we're all about money. And some have refused to give completely. There are churches where, in my church context, there are, you know, in most cases, when a church begins a new project like our own, we have a house project going on. When a church begins a new project like that, you may find one, two, three, four, depending on the size of the church, persons, members of the church. You may find that they choose to leave the church for that time of a project because they don't want to be part of the giving. They value their money so much, and they feel that the church is all about money, and so they're not going to be part of the church during this period of the project because they're going to demand a lot of money from them, and they don't, they themselves, they're struggling to make ends meet. It puts a lot of pressure on us pastors to be able to accomplish what we have to accomplish, because like you said, money is not evil. Money is good. Actually, it helps us accomplish things. It helps us do a lot of things. And every time you appreciate your people, all of these things you're doing around the world. I mean, sometimes I feel like I should just point some people, some pastors to the KVC website and say, look at what these people do, with their money. And that's not all. All of it is not listed on the site. And it's interesting. We get put under pressure, and some of us have decided we're not going to talk about money again. We would rather have someone else do it. And that's one of the problems we're facing as far as money and church is concerned. The second thing that relating to the church and money is that the world, those outside of the church, always feel that the church has a lot of money and that pastors have a lot of money. And that's a big problem in our context too, because I remember when we were struggling. I've been in this church, it's my 6th year now. When I just came, I was a few months in, and we were struggling to get land for the church because they were begging some space in a school compound to use, and so we thought to get land and get our own place of worship. When we started to follow up to get that, we went to several places, and whenever we mentioned that the church wanted to buy land, they'll triple the amount. They'll tell you, yeah, it's the church, you have money. And interestingly, it's never true, because one person has said the church is like that one place where 10 rich people gather and they become poor, and that's almost true in our context, because really that thought that the church has a lot of money, and after all, the pastor works his money through the church, the offerings, the tithes they're given to the pastor, and all of that. Those things, people sort of believe them, and it affects the church a lot. But generally, we're all out there chasing money, and you have pastors now who have decided to chase money instead, and not do the work, not be faithful in what God has called them to do. It's really difficult, and when you're in a context like ours, it becomes even more challenging, because you have real money issues, and then you have the expectations that God has on you as a faithful minister in the church. And you're like, so which one should I do? Because the church cannot give you the kind of life that you, your kids, and your family, deserve. Very few churches can do that for their pastors. It's not in every case, but for the most part, like 90% of churches cannot pay their pastors well, so it's a lot of pressure on the pastor, a lot of pressure on Christians as well, when the pastor gets really demanding. And sometimes they just feel like, this man wants to eat our money. He wants to use it for himself. And it's never like that. So I think if we're able to manage our monies well, we will do better things with the little that we have. We'll be able to do much for God as well, as a church. If people learn to, like you said, get out of debt. I think my wife and myself, we're actually on an aggressive anti-debt campaign since the last time you preached on this, because we really saw that one of the major things that really drained us was debt. We had loans here and there, trying to meet up with the demands of family and all of that. And I cleared my part and we're working on clearing her part and all of that. And it's relieving because the money we've been able to save from that has helped us do much more, help more people and all of that. If we get out of debt and start to really save and invest if we can, and then open up to giving, like you said, there is nothing more enjoyable than when we give, and help people with our money. And that's one other thing that my wife and myself we're trying to do now, to really engage giving and just help people. If you've been of great help to us, and we don't see why we shouldn't extend the same to others. And so I'll call that a personal family campaign we're on. We're trying to do that. We're not asking for people to send money requests. we we do that. We do that as we have the opportunity, and we try not to miss an opportunity. But there's a lot we can do with money if only we stop chasing money. We stop working for money and let money work for us. Let money become the agent by which we do the good work of the Lord. So I look forward to this again. I know I'm going to get more rebuke from it this weekend, and get more insight and more light to be able to live better. So, yeah.
Good. All right.
We could talk all day about money if we had to, and all that, but it was great to hear your thoughts, Pastor Brain. And yeah, Dad, it's going to be a good message this weekend. And yeah, to everybody listening, thanks for being with us in this podcast. Join us this weekend at Keys Vineyard Church. We'll be good. And anyway, see you next time. God bless.